And Jesus said, "Go out to the main roads and invite to the feast whomever you find." Joseph Bradley was a crane operator with the New York construction company. Immediately after attacks on 9/11, he volunteered, went to his union hall to see what he could do. That night, he was assigned to a project at Ground Zero. Joe said, and I quote, "A fire chief wanted to clear a field 3 feet deep, and there was a lot of heavy iron on top of it. 4 or 5 of the iron workers said they'd like to work with me. Then all of a sudden, 25 firefighters showed up right then and there with equipment. There was no supervision. There was no foreman. No one told us what to do. We just worked as smooth as you can imagine." And he continues, Joseph Bradley, "I prayed for darkness because I couldn't handle what I was seeing. The first body was a lady, middle-aged. We placed her down on the stretcher, carried her out, closed her eyes. We found one body after another, one after another. And after a while, I was sitting on the curb with my head in my hands. It was the middle of the night. That's when the Salvation Army kids came around, and they appeared in their sneakers with their pink hair, their belly buttons showing, the bandanas around their face. One was a little girl pushing a shopping cart full of eye wash through the muck. They came with water and cold towels. They took off my boots, put on dry socks on my feet. I've never seen people pull together so fast. And when I got to Houston," Joe continues, "Houston Street, a bunch of the other kids showed up, all pierced and tattooed, multicolored hair. They made a nice little makeshift stage, and they started to cheer us as we came out. And that was it for me. I couldn't take any more. I never identified with these people before in my life, and I cried all the way home. And I tell you," Joe continues, "I've been a construction worker all my life. I never knew anything about Episcopalians, Methodists, Presbyterians, Catholics, gays, or people with nuts and bolts through their cheeks and their noses. But now I know them. Now I know them. We are not the heroes," Joe said. "They are the heroes. They cried and they prayed for me and others. I was emotionally overcome." End of quote. My brothers and sisters, the gospel that you heard today, that the deacon just read, has been realized among Joe and his heroes. Everyone has a place. Everyone has a place at God's table. Regardless of race, regardless of color, regardless of creed, regardless of family. And if we're going to be faithful to God's vision, then we must embrace a new faith-centered vision that sees beyond color, beyond physical abilities, beyond ethnic stereotypes, and see all people in the image of God. We must be willing to give joyfully of what we have and accept humbly everyone at our table. The Gospel of the Wedding Feast is a third parable Jesus addresses to the religious leaders of their time who have challenged Jesus' authority to seek and to discredit him. The parable is another illustration of Israel's rejection of God's promise, and God extends that invitation to everyone: Gentiles, foreigners, sinners, and even those who do not know God. My heart goes out to Pope Francis. Francis is frustrated. Maybe in his quiet, private moments, he weeps. All he's trying to do is sincerely bring about the wishes and invitation of God's plan for all people of God. All people of God. Especially those who have been cast out of the people of God. Some of us call it the church. For so many centuries. But Francis is confronted. He's confronted by cardinals and bishops and priests and lay people who do not understand God's plan, God's table. In the latest issue of America magazine, Pope Francis acknowledges that many American church members are criticizing his leadership, just as the people criticized the leadership of Jesus Christ in his time. Francis said, quote, "The door is open. Everyone has their own space in the church, in the people of God. We help people to live so that they can occupy their space with maturity and joy. And this applies to all kinds of people." End of quote. The gospel is deeply relevant today, my brothers and sisters. Very, very relevant in this 2023. God's song is, "All are welcome." Pope Francis' song is the same. All are welcome. In the gospel, Jesus articulates a very radical new vision of humanity, of men and women, that ignores suspicions, doubts, outcasts, and instead recognizes every person as a child of God, worthy of respect, worthy of love, worthy of compassion. And for us, in order to take our place at the table, God's table, we must realize God's vision for the human family at our own table. Yes, indeed, all are welcome. For many years ago, one of our pastors would not allow a Down syndrome child to receive the Eucharist for the first time. The parents were devastated. I invited the family to my house. I held up a slice of bread and said to the child, then 15 years old, "Peggy, what is this?" And in her own difficult way, she said, "That's a piece of bread." Then I picked up a host, an unconsecrated host. I said, Peggy, this is the bread that I use at the altar. What is it, Peggy? That all the people come up and they receive this bread. What is that bread? And Peggy said, that's Jesus. 2 weeks later, Peggy received her first communion. A week before that, I invited the people to bring one rose for Peggy as she celebrates her first communion. One rose? The family took home about 100 dozen of roses that Sunday morning. All are welcome. All are welcome. I had a very dear friend. He was a priest, Father Jerry Nadine, Afro-American. He died last week in San Diego. As a young man in 1940, this young man desired to be a priest, wanted to go into a seminary. Now, you can't go into a seminary unless you get a bishop to sponsor you. Not pay for you, but sponsor you. Jerry approached 5 dioceses in these United States, and 5 different bishops refused him. The reason was, what are we going to do with a black priest? Eventually, the Bishop of Brooklyn, God bless him, whatever his name was, welcomed Jerry. Jerry became a priest. He was a priest for 61 years, spent 25 years in the United States Air Force. All are welcome. All are welcome. Pope Francis on October 4th officially opened the long-expected Vatican Summit on the future of the Catholic Church. The Synod, big word, it just means a meeting, encouraging its participants, bishops and cardinals and lay people, men and women, to reject the concept of doctrinal rigidity, to embrace a vision of the church that is open, the Holy Father said. A church that is welcoming, not a church that sets up all kind of rules, not a church of the past, a church of the future, an open church. This is the primary task of the Synod for the whole month of October, to focus on God and to be a church that looks mercifully at all people. That's all. Nothing heavy. Just accept me the way I am. To accept her, him, them the way they are. And the Pope said in one of his talks in the beginning of this month to these people meeting in Rome, quote, let us be a church. Let us be a church that does not impose burdens. Instead, a church that repeats and respects love for everyone. Come, you who are weary and oppressed. Come, you have lost your way or feel far away. Come, those of you who have closed the doors of hope. The church is here. The church is here waiting for you. And speaking briefly off the cuff on his way back from Portugal after visiting 50,000 teenagers Francis repeated a refrain that he has been using for the past 5, 6, 7 months, that the church should be open to all. And he used the Italian word which means all, tutti. The church is open to all, tutti, tutti, tutti. Everyone, everyone. All are welcome. All are welcome. All are welcome in this place.